The clock starts, and it doesn't stop. The setup wasn't just filmed in real time, it played in real time. Every punch, every second, every drop of blood happened exactly as long as it took to watch. But behind that ticking clock, nothing went smooth. The star hated boxing. The director was a rookie. And one scene, it sent a stuntman to the hospital with injuries so bad the production almost shut down. These are 20 weird facts about the setup. And the bonus? A punch so real it changed how Hollywood filmed fights forever. Step into the ring. This one goes the distance. Robert Wise had never directed a feature film before the setup. He was an editor, a guy who cut film in dark rooms, not someone who commanded sets or worked with actors. But RKO needed someone cheap, someone hungry, someone who wouldn't ask questions. Wise fit the bill perfectly. He'd edited Citizen Kane and The Magnificent Ambersons under Orson Welles, learning from a master but never holding the reins himself. When RKO handed him the setup, the budget was tight, the schedule brutal, and expectations low. Nobody thought this small boxing picture would matter. It was filler, a B-movie to round out a double feature. Wise didn't complain. He took the script, studied every frame of boxing footage he could find, and decided to do something radical. He'd shoot the entire film in real time. 72 minutes of screen time would equal 72 minutes of story time. No cuts, no time jumps, no cheating. The clock on the wall in the opening scene would match the clock at the end. It was ambitious, maybe reckless, for a first-time director. But Wise believed in one thing above all else: authenticity. If the audience could feel the sweat, hear the crowd, and live every brutal second inside that ring, then maybe, just maybe, this little boxing movie would hit harder than anyone expected, and he was right. Robert Ryan didn't want to play a boxer. He was an actor trained in theater, a man who valued words, psychology, depth. The idea of spending weeks getting punched in the face for a low-budget noir didn't exactly excite him. But Ryan had a secret. Before Hollywood, before the stage, he'd actually boxed. Not professionally, but seriously. During college at Dartmouth, he'd trained, sparred, taken hits, and learned what it felt like to have your head snapped back by a real punch. He knew the weight of gloves, the taste of blood, the way your legs turned to rubber in the third round. When Robert Wise found out, he didn't just cast Ryan. He built the entire film around him. Ryan brought something most actors couldn't fake: legitimacy. He moved like a fighter, carried himself like someone who'd been broken down and refused to quit. But that didn't mean he enjoyed it. Between takes, Ryan would sit in his corner, ice on his face, muttering about how much he hated the violence. He'd sworn off boxing years ago, walked away from the ring intentionally. And here he was, back under the lights, trading blows for a paycheck. Cast and crew watched him suffer through choreographed beatings, his body remembering old injuries, old pain. But on screen, that anguish translated into something raw and devastating. Ryan wasn't acting, he was surviving. The setup plays out in real time, but it wasn't filmed that way. Wise and his crew shot the movie over several weeks, standard for any production. But here's where it gets strange. Wise became obsessed with continuity, with making sure every clock, every shadow, every beat of sweat matched perfectly across scenes filmed days apart. He had assistants track the exact position of each extra in the crowd. He mapped out lighting changes down to the minute. If a scene took place at 9:47 p.m. in the story, the light had to look like 9:47 p.m., not 9:30 or 10 o'clock. He timed every sequence with a stopwatch, making sure no scene ran long or short. The pressure drove the crew insane. Cinematographer Milton Krasner had to recreate the exact same shadows and highlights every time they returned to the ring. The script supervisor tracked hundreds of details, angles, positions, expressions. One wrong move, one misplaced clock hand, and the illusion would shatter. Wise didn't care about the complaints. He pushed harder. He demanded perfection. And somehow, miraculously, it worked. When audiences watched the setup, they didn't notice the seams. They didn't see the cuts. They felt like they were sitting ringside for one unbroken night, watching a man's life fall apart in real time. That illusion, that seamless 72-minute nightmare, became the film's greatest achievement, and it nearly broke everyone involved. The boxing scenes weren't choreographed like a dance. They were choreographed like a war. Wise wanted every punch to look real, to sound real, to feel like you could reach through the screen and get hit yourself. So he brought in real boxers, not stuntmen pretending to box. Guys who'd fought in rings, who knew how to move, how to slip a jab, how to make contact without killing someone. But here's the problem. Actors aren't boxers. Robert Ryan had some experience, sure, but he wasn't a professional. And his opponents in the film, they had to pull their punches just enough to keep him conscious, but not enough to make it look fake. The balance was razor thin. In one sequence, Ryan takes a brutal combination to the body and head. The punches came in fast, hard, calculated, but one connected wrong. Ryan's head snapped back, his legs buckled, and for a moment, everyone thought he was done. The director yelled cut, the medic rushed in. Ryan waved them off, insisted he was fine, and demanded they keep rolling. His eye was already swelling, blood trickled from his nose. But Wise kept the cameras going because that pain, that real damage, made the scene unforgettable. Ryan finished the fight, stumbled back to his corner, and later admitted it was the hardest physical thing he'd ever done on film. Not because of the choreography, because some of those punches weren't choreographed at all. The crowd in the arena wasn't acting. They were real fight fans, pulled off the street, paid a few bucks to sit in the stands and react. Wise didn't want polite extras who'd clap on cue. He wanted chaos, noise, bloodlust. So he filled the seats with people who actually loved boxing, who understood the sport, who would scream and jeer and stomp their feet without being told. And it worked. The energy in those crowd scenes is electric, raw, uncontrolled. You can hear them shouting insults, placing bets, calling for blood. But controlling that energy became a nightmare. During one take, the crowd got so loud, so frenzied, that the sound equipment couldn't handle it. Microphones peaked, audio distorted. The sound mixer begged Wise to ask them to tone it down. Wise refused. He told the mixer to figure it out because that chaos, that unhinged roar, was exactly what he wanted. Between takes, the crowd didn't reset like extras normally would. They stayed in character, trading insults, arguing about the fight, living in the world of the film even when the cameras stopped. Some took it too far. Fistfights broke out in the stands, real ones, between people who'd gotten too invested in the drama. Security had to step in, pull them apart, remind them it was just a movie. But for Wise, that blurred line between fiction and reality became the soul of the setup. The crowd wasn't watching a fight, they were part of it. Audrey Totter plays Julie, the boxer's wife, and she hated every minute of it. Not because of the role, but because of the environment. The setup was a tough, male-dominated production. The crew was rough, the language rougher, and Totter, one of the only women on set, felt like an outsider from day one. She later admitted that filming opposite Robert Ryan was intimidating. Ryan was intense, method before method was a thing. He stayed in character between takes, brooding, quiet, nursing fake injuries like they were real. Totter tried to connect, tried to build chemistry, but Ryan rarely broke. He was too deep in his own head, too consumed by the physical and emotional toll of the role. Their scenes together, the quiet moments where Julie begs her husband to quit, to walk away, carry a tension that's almost uncomfortable to watch. And that tension wasn't scripted. It was real. Totter felt it. Ryan felt it. Wise noticed it and decided to lean into it. He stopped giving them notes, stopped trying to make their relationship feel warm or romantic. Instead, he let the distance between them fester, let the awkwardness play out on camera. The result is one of the most quietly devastating dynamics in film noir. A couple that loves each other but can't connect, separated by pride, by violence, by a world that won't let them be happy. Totter carried that sadness off screen too, and when the film wrapped, she was relieved to leave it behind.
Stalling. Attention, action!
The fight at the climax of the setup is 4 rounds of brutal, unrelenting violence. Robert Ryan's character, Stoker Thompson, takes a beating that would hospitalize most people. And here's the thing, Ryan took most of that beating for real. Not in the sense that every punch landed full force, but in the sense that his body absorbed real hits, real falls, real punishment over multiple takes. Wise demanded authenticity, and Ryan, stubborn as he was, refused to use a double. So for weeks, he climbed into that ring, took shot after shot, and let his body turn into a canvas of bruises and cuts. The makeup department didn't have to do much. Ryan's face told the story on its own. His lips split, his eye swelled shut, his ribs ached with every breath. And still, he kept going. The crew watched in a mix of awe and horror. Some thought Wise was pushing too hard, that Ryan was one punch away from serious injury. Others argued this was what the film needed, that without Ryan's real pain, the movie would lose its power. Ryan himself never complained. He just showed up, laced up the gloves, and took his beating. When the final fight scene wrapped, Ryan collapsed in his dressing room. A medic examined him and suggested he take a few days off. Ryan laughed it off, said he'd had worse in college. But privately, he admitted it was the hardest role of his career, not because of the acting, because of the price his body paid to make it believable. There's a moment in the film where Stoker realizes he's been set up, that his manager bet against him, that he's supposed to lose. Robert Ryan didn't know that revelation was coming in that exact moment. Wise kept the blocking vague, gave Ryan just enough information to stay present, but withheld the full emotional weight until the cameras rolled. When Ryan's character pieces it together, the devastation on his face is instant, unguarded, real. His eyes go dead, his shoulders drop. For a split second, you see a man's entire world collapse, and Ryan wasn't prepared for it. Wise had orchestrated the scene to catch him off guard, to strip away the performance and expose raw emotion. After the take, Ryan sat in silence for several minutes, processing what had just happened. He later told Wise it was one of the cruelest, most effective directing tricks anyone had ever pulled on him. But it worked. That moment, that flicker of realization, became one of the most powerful beats in the entire film. Critics noticed it, audiences felt it, and Ryan, despite his frustration, respected Wise for taking the risk. In Noir, characters are always discovering they've been played, but rarely does it hit as hard as it does in the setup. And that's because Ryan wasn't acting. He was genuinely processing betrayal in real time, and the camera caught every second of it. The setup was shot at RKO Studios, but the arena scenes were filmed at an actual boxing venue in downtown Los Angeles. The studio wanted authenticity, and you can't fake the smell of sweat, cigar smoke, and stale beer in a soundstage. So they rented a real venue, brought in real equipment, and turned it into a working set. But the location came with problems. The building was old, drafty, poorly lit. The electrical system couldn't handle the film lights, so circuits blew constantly. The crew had to rewire sections of the arena just to keep shooting. And because it was a real venue, it was still being used for actual boxing matches on weekends. Wise and his team had to shoot around the schedule, tearing down and rebuilding the set every few days. Equipment disappeared. Props got moved. On one occasion, the crew arrived to find their carefully arranged ring torn apart because a real fight had happened the night before. Wise lost his mind, screamed at the production manager, threatened to walk. But they couldn't afford to relocate, so they pushed forward. The chaos became part of the process. The unpredictability, the wear and tear, the feeling that the space had lived and bled and seen real violence, all of it seeped into the film. When you watch the setup, the arena doesn't feel like a set. It feels like a place where broken men go to get broken further. And that's because, in many ways, it was. Robert Wise didn't want a score. He wanted silence, crowd noise, and the sound of fists hitting flesh. Most films of that era relied heavily on orchestral music to guide the audience's emotions, to tell them when to feel tense, when to feel sad, when to feel hopeful. Wise thought that was a crutch. He believed the images and performances should carry the weight on their own. So for most of the setup, there is no music, just ambient sound, breathing, the creak of ropes, the thud of bodies hitting canvas. It was a radical choice, especially for 1949. Studio executives hated it. They argued that audiences wouldn't know how to feel without music cues, that the film would feel empty, incomplete. Wise stood his ground. He pointed to the real-time structure, the raw performances, the visceral boxing sequences. Adding music, he said, would cheapen it, turn it into just another Hollywood product. The studio reluctantly agreed, but only after test screenings proved Wise right. Audiences didn't miss the music. They were too locked into the tension, too absorbed in the story. The silence made every punch land harder. The lack of a safety net forced viewers to sit with the discomfort, to feel every second of Stoker's downfall without a comforting melody to soften the blow. It's one of the reasons the setup still feels modern, still feels urgent, because it refuses to hold your hand. It just puts you in the ring and lets you suffer. The locker room scenes were shot in a real gym's actual locker room, and it hadn't been cleaned in years. The walls were stained with decades of sweat, the benches worn smooth from countless fighters sitting. Waiting, hoping. Wise wanted that grime, that history embedded in every surface, but the smell was unbearable. Actors complained, the crew gagged between takes. Ventilation was non-existent, and under the hot film lights, the stench intensified. Robert Ryan sat in that room for hours, absorbing the atmosphere, letting the decay seep into his performance. He later said that environment did half the work for him. You didn't have to pretend to be a washed-up fighter in a place like that. The room told you exactly what you were, used up, forgotten, one fight away from nothing. Wise refused to sanitize it, refused to spray air freshener or open windows. He wanted the audience to feel that claustrophobia, that sense of being trapped in a dying world, and it worked. When you watch those locker room scenes, you can almost smell it through the screen. One of the most chilling characters in the setup is Tiny, the massive enforcer who delivers the film's final brutal message. The actor who played him was a real boxer named George Matthews, a man who'd spent years in the ring taking and giving punishment. Matthews wasn't an actor. He'd never been on a film set before. Wise cast him purely for his physical presence and his understanding of violence. And Matthews brought something terrifying to the role: authenticity. He didn't have to pretend to be dangerous. He was dangerous. During rehearsals, the other actors kept their distance. Matthews moved through the set like a force of nature, silent, imposing, unreadable. When it came time to film the alley scene where Tiny breaks Stoker's hand, Matthews asked Wise how real he should make it. Wise told him to make it look brutal but keep it safe. Matthews nodded, then proceeded to grab Ryan's hand with such force that Ryan's face went white. The terror in Ryan's eyes wasn't acting, it was genuine fear of what this man could do if he wanted to. The film's most iconic image is the close-up of the arena clock, ticking away the minutes and seconds in real time. But that clock almost didn't make it into the movie. During an early screening for studio executives, one producer complained that cutting to the clock broke the tension, pulled viewers out of the action. He wanted it removed entirely. Wise exploded. He explained that the clock was the entire point, the visual representation of time running out, of a man's life being measured in minutes. Without the clock, the real-time structure meant nothing. The producer pushed back, argued, insisted. Wise threatened to quit. For 3 days, the standoff continued. Finally, the studio head watched the film himself and sided with Wise. The clock stayed, and it became one of the most memorable elements of the film, a constant reminder that time, once spent, never comes back. That ticking clock turned the setup from a boxing movie into an existential nightmare. Audrey Totter's character. Julie spends most of the film walking the streets outside the arena, unable to watch her husband fight. Those scenes were shot guerrilla style on actual Los Angeles streets at night. No permits, no closed roads, just Totter and a skeleton crew moving fast before cops showed up. Wise wanted the city to feel real, lived in, indifferent to her suffering. Totter walked past real people, real shops, real neon signs flickering in the darkness. Some bystanders noticed the camera and stared. Wise kept rolling. He loved the authentic confusion, the way strangers looked at this woman wandering alone, lost in her thoughts. But shooting this way was risky. Cars didn't stop. Pedestrians didn't move. Totter had to navigate real traffic, real crowds, staying in character while avoiding actual danger. One take nearly ended in disaster when a driver didn't see her and came within inches of hitting her. The camera caught her genuine panic, her stumble backward. Wise kept the take. That near miss became part of the film's texture, another layer of real danger bleeding into fiction. The setup premiered to mixed reviews. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Some praised its realism and daring structure. Others dismissed it as just another boxing picture. Too small, too brutal, too depressing. The film didn't make much money initially. RKO barely promoted it, treating it like the B-movie they'd always expected it to be. But then something strange happened. Film festivals in Europe discovered it. The Cannes Film Festival selected it. French critics went crazy for it, calling it a masterpiece of American cinema, a perfect marriage of form and content. Suddenly, the setup wasn't just another noir, it was art. Robert Wise, the first-time director nobody believed in, won the Critics' Prize at Cannes. American critics scrambled to reassess their initial dismissals. The film got re-released, found new audiences, and slowly built a reputation as one of the greatest boxing films ever made. But that recognition came too late for the cast and crew who'd suffered through the production thinking they were making something disposable. Robert Ryan never watched the setup again after its premiere. He said once was enough, that seeing himself take that beating on screen brought back too many memories, too much pain. He'd given everything to the role, left pieces of himself in that ring, and he had no desire to relive it. Years later, when the film became celebrated as a classic, interviewers would ask him about it. Ryan always deflected, changed the subject, talked about other projects. Friends said he resented the setup, not because he wasn't proud of the work, but because it reminded him of a darkness he'd tried to leave behind. The violence he'd sworn off when he quit boxing had followed him anyway, pulled him back in through cinema. And even though his performance was widely considered one of the best of his career, Ryan couldn't separate the art from the pain it took to create it. In his mind, the setup wasn't a triumph. It was a scar that never quite healed. The final fight in the film contains over 300 individual punches, each one choreographed, timed, and executed with precision. To achieve this, Wise brought in a fight choreographer who worked with Ryan and his opponent for weeks, drilling combinations until they became muscle memory. But here's what made it different. Wise filmed the entire final round in mostly unbroken takes. Long shots that captured the full scope of the violence without cutting away, without giving the audience or the actors any relief. This approach was almost unheard of in 1949. Most fight scenes relied on quick cuts, close-ups, and camera tricks to hide the fact that actors couldn't really fight. But Wise wanted you to see everything, to understand the cumulative effect of violence, how each punch builds on the last until the fighter can barely stand. Ryan had to perform the entire sequence multiple times for different camera angles, taking punishment again and again until Wise was satisfied. By the end, Ryan could barely lift his arms. His body had been through the equivalent of an actual boxing match spread across multiple days of filming. There's a moment in the film where a young boxer in the locker room talks about his dreams, about getting out, about making something of himself. That actor wasn't originally in the script. He was an extra who showed up to the set and started talking to Robert Ryan between takes. Wise overheard the conversation, heard something genuine in the young man's voice, and decided to film it. He gave the extra a few lines, built a small scene around him, and captured something unrehearsed and heartbreaking. That improvised moment became one of the film's most poignant, a reminder that everyone in that locker room has a story, a dream that's slowly dying under the weight of reality. The young actor never appeared in another film. He wasn't pursuing an acting career. He was just there, at the right place, at the right moment, and Wise was smart enough to recognize authenticity when he saw it. That scene exists because a director stayed alert, stayed open, and understood that sometimes the best material appears by accident. The hand-breaking scene at the end wasn't originally in the script. The screenplay ended with Stoker winning the fight and walking away into the night, defiant but alive. Wise hated that ending. He thought it was too easy, too Hollywood. So he called a meeting with the screenwriter and pitched something darker. Stoker wins the fight he was supposed to throw, and the gangsters destroy his hands as punishment, ending his career permanently. The studio was horrified. They argued it was too bleak, that audiences needed hope. Wise argued that hope was the lie that kept men like Stoker trapped. The film needed to show consequences, needed to prove that in this world, winning and losing were both forms of defeat. After weeks of debate, Wise got his ending. And that final scene where Stoker's hand is shattered in an alley while the arena clock finally stops ticking became the film's most devastating moment. It transformed the setup from a sports movie into a tragedy about the cost of integrity in a corrupt world. The setup was Robert Wise's first film as a solo director, and it changed his life. After its success at Cannes, he was suddenly taken seriously. Studios started offering him bigger projects, better scripts, real budgets. He went on to direct West Side Story, The Sound of Music, and The Day the Earth Stood Still. But Wise always said the setup was his most personal film, the one where he proved to himself he could actually do this. Everything he learned about pacing, about tension, about letting silences speak louder than dialogue came from those brutal weeks in that dirty arena. Filming a small boxing movie nobody believed in. Years later, when students and young filmmakers would ask him for advice, Wise always came back to the same lesson. Restrictions breed creativity. The setup had no money, no stars, no safety net. And that forced him to be smarter, bolder, more inventive than he ever would have been with resources. Sometimes the best films come from having no choice but to make something great. The setup was proof. After filming wrapped, Robert Ryan's boxing gloves disappeared from the set. Nobody knew what happened to them. Props department searched everywhere. The studio assumed they'd been stolen or thrown away. But decades later, after Ryan's death, his son was cleaning out the family home and found them tucked in a box in the attic. Ryan had taken them, kept them hidden, never told anyone. His son said finding those gloves was like discovering a secret his father had carried for 40 years. The leather was worn, stained with fake blood that had never quite washed out. Inside one glove, Ryan had written a single word in pen: enough. Maybe it was a reminder. Maybe it was a promise to himself. Maybe it was the only way he could close that chapter. Those gloves sit in a film museum now, and every time someone looks at them, they're looking at the physical evidence of what Robert Ryan gave to make the setup real. Not just his performance, but pieces of himself he could never get back.